Hello and welcome. Another Thursday evening, another discussion with regard to the College Coaches Corner. Each and every week, we take some time to talk to college coaches around the country, all levels, all divisions. And today, I thought we would really, we talked to Chris Shank up north in southern New Hampshire. So today, I thought we'd talk to a true NCAA Division II coaching, what I would call icon, elder statesman, I guess is the right term. But Rick Odette, now the head coach for the Mocs at Florida Southern. Rick, first and foremost, thank you so much for taking the time to join me this morning.
Thanks for having me, Walter. Appreciate you.
You're very, very welcome. Rick, I want to kick this right off with a lot of parents, a lot of student athletes within college baseball. We get lost in that JUCO Division I, the NAIA Division I, and obviously NCAA Division I. But college baseball as a whole is changing. And now that you've taken over a new program since this past summer in 2024, talk a little bit about your processes within Division II at the NCAA level and how you are looking forward with regard to not only recruiting but team, putting together your program and your staff.
Well, that's a good question, right? Things have changed tremendously. I mean, really, it started, I guess, the easiest thing to say is it started around the COVID time because that's when the transfer portal started changing, NIL started changing. Of course, there was plenty of things going around within our country, but really, it was more of a conversation of what's the landscape going to look like, and I think everybody's trying to figure that out right now. We're, you know, what I did 10 years ago would not work right now. Of course, with the transfer portal piece, but we still want quality players. We still want quality high school guys, quality student athletes, people that we want in our program. That will never change, but the way we get them now has definitely changed for sure.
So I would love for you to talk a little bit about not only the Sunshine State Conference with regard to Division II, but overall the Division II landscape with regard to scholarship, roster sizes. There's been one share. Has there been any changes that parents need to be aware of? Anything that is a ripple effect from the settlement level of Division I?
We've been pretty fortunate from the way ours has worked. 9 is our max at Division Two. There's not technically a set roster cap on exactly how many you can or cannot have on your roster. A lot of Division Twos and some Division Threes will have JV programs, developmental teams, as we do here at Florida Southern. That's something that has been beneficial for us because we can use it as a developmental team. They're going to play 25 games, and a lot of that happens in the fall with the idea of getting them better throughout the spring and also playing outside competition. But sometimes, especially when we're talking about some of our players are 22, 23, 24 years old, the 18-year-old kid coming out of high school physically a lot of times isn't ready for it just yet. And a lot of times that will just be, the way his body's working, where he's at, the physicality of that player, the mentality of that guy. There's so many different things. The level of the Sunshine State Conference, anybody who's followed Division II baseball, I think it's very comparable to a lot of Division I levels. And again, I'm not comparing us to the elite of the elite, but what you'll see through our league, including us, are a lot of those guys that started the Division I programs, especially some of the what are considered higher level programs, are in our league now. And they're getting themselves opportunities to come in for one plane. It used to be you get a transfer because maybe he wasn't a great student, maybe he wasn't a great fit, he got in trouble. So we kind of stayed away from those guys. Now it's just become a numbers game, and we've really benefited from it. That when you're looking at arms and you're talking about stuff and things like that, 10 years ago to have these guys that we have on our team right now probably wouldn't exist. Would they develop? Yeah, sure. We have plenty of drafts and have, but now those guys are more game ready for us. And a lot of times they just haven't gotten the opportunity where they came from.
This is a discussion that I think is great. Having you on to be able to ask these questions, I think it would be a tremendous resource for parents. Let's talk about the landscape today. We can't go backwards. But from a developmental perspective, if you could offer some advice to families, parents, athletes, when should they really begin to prepare for if they aspire to play at the collegiate level? When should they really begin to prepare, both physically and mentally, to be a part of a college program? Should that start your freshman sophomore year? Should you kind of get into that later junior senior year to begin to prepare? What are your thoughts with regard to now travel during the summer, or strength training and really get ready and get prepared to be a college student athlete?
To be honest, it's a really difficult question. And the reason I say that is, you know, where I had been before, we did early recruiting in high school because we just couldn't get in the bidding war with some of those kids. You know, we had to get those guys maybe on the front end that we thought would develop throughout their high school year. So maybe we're signing that kid or getting that kid committed as a junior. Verbal that kid as a junior or so. Which at the Division II level, you started to do that mid through the junior year, towards the end of the junior year. That's coming. It's becoming a little bit different now, just because, like us, we signed. Got this job in July, and we've gotten 7 commitments, or 6 high school kids and 1 transfer. And all 6 of those guys were guys that we started recruiting in August. Now, not that we identified in August, but of course we weren't here until July, so that we really got them. Where a couple years ago, that wouldn't even been something that we could do and get a quality piece for us. What we think is a quality piece. It's tough now to say when should you start, should you not, play in the summer, should you get stronger. I think physicality at all times, anytime you can physically get yourself stronger, especially with the age of these players now, that's a huge piece. With that being said, I also think it's a major part of going out there and understanding how to play. And you have to be able to play, but you also then during the week, you can't just play Thursday to Sunday. You have to be able to prepare during the week. So we get a lot of guys that you would be surprised what they don't know, and stuff that you assume they did. And for whatever reason, they don't. They play too many games, they train too much, whatever the case is. We're looking for baseball players first. We're not looking for trainers. We want people who train hard to become good baseball players. We don't want people who train hard to be good trainers. That does not help our team win. So that's a big piece for us. Is we want guys who know how to play the game. We want guys that are physical, of course, or at least are going to develop to become physical. And we want the work ethic of a guy who cares to get better every day to help our team win. I think if we can find that player, then we're in pretty good shape.
So, as someone that's been around, the amount of time that you have being a Midwest guy, it's not about the warm weather player versus the cold weather player, et cetera. Talk about the mindset of potential recruits. Like, what are you looking at beyond skill? Like, when you're going out and you're evaluating a player, what are some of the key attributes that you're looking at during an in-game evaluation for both offensive players as well as pitchers?
Well, I think the easy thing is energy, right? That's the first thing. Anybody can walk to a park, and even if you're not a huge baseball background guy, you can pay attention to the energy in which they play, how they get on and off the field, how they run down the line, how they get off the mound. They struggle. Are they launching something in the dugout? What does that look like? I pay attention to what their teammates do when they struggle. When you walk off the mound and one guy hits you high five, and all of a sudden you start looking around going, man, does anybody like that kid? Because what's going to happen, it's usually going to end up going to your next place too. So the way
Right.
that player maybe is accepted within his teammates is maybe something he's not doing right, or maybe selfish or whatever. So it starts there. The physicality piece, how he runs down the line. Obviously, there's numbers that go along with that. You can start to see it. For me, we're looking for a certain swing that fits into our program. We're looking for a certain arm path that fits into our program. To say it specifically, it's tough to do, obviously, in a podcast. But I think it's something. It doesn't have to be the 6'5" right-handed arm or left-handed arm. I like those guys. I'd be lying to you if I didn't, but who doesn't? But it's somebody that's going to command the strike zone. It's somebody who's going to be able to spin a breaking ball and be able to throw a third pitch. It's somebody that's going to compete, control the running game. Offensively, it's not always, if you look at a college, stat line at the end of the year, there's not six guys hitting 10, 15 home runs, not at our level. Sometimes there might, you might have some guys that have some power, but we're looking for guys that can have quality at bats. We just talked about this in our program this week is, if you're waiting for the 3-run homer every time up, you're going to be really disappointed. Understand what a quality at bat looks like. And that could be moving a guy over, driving a guy in, doing your job in the situation. Those are the most important things. So you can watch that while you're watching a guy play. Now, it's hard, if you don't have a ton of skill set from a standpoint of, I look at the physicality of them. It's hard to see that guy when you're recruiting if you're not sitting down on that guy multiple games. So that is pretty difficult. I would always encourage people is go to the camps that make sense to you. If I'm a player that I know I'm not a Power 5 guy, that I can't fit into that, why am I going to that camp? Doesn't make any sense to me. Go to a camp that makes sense. Go to fall, scrimmages. Go to fall practices. Just about every coach I know will allow somebody to show up to a practice. Go to it. See where you fit at. And be honest with yourself. So there's a lot of give and take there for sure.
So I want to kind of expand on that point a little bit because a lot of the industry as a whole, we hear the term find the right fit, but the right fit is an individual approach. It's not a collective approach. And that's where I think the industry as a whole, we're trying to say that college athletics is the destination point for the majority, when in reality it's the minority. High school athletes are not guaranteed opportunities at the college level. So how do parents, or how should parents determine what is the right fit? More importantly, how should an athlete approach the right fit when they're looking at, for a college opportunity or roster spot?
Well, I think the first thing is reality, right? Like you have
Right.
to evaluate yourself and your family, and it's hard because when it's emotional, I have a daughter who's a sophomore in high school, and she's a softball player, and I've got a son who's a sophomore in junior college right now, and here in Florida, it's hard to evaluate your son or daughter because it's personal, right? So,
Right.
but the thing is honesty is what's going to help that person stay at the school they want to be at. When I see kids post stuff on social media, I lived out a dream and I'm going to a Division I school. Well, you see how many people are in the portal. You know how many of those kids said this was their dream? Find the right fit. You have to brag about where you went and not where you're going. And sometimes that's hard for mom and dad to do, right? Like they want to walk in and they want to be the big shot and tell them where their kid's going. But a year later, if your son or daughter went through a lot of troubling times because they picked the wrong fit because of the name, then I guarantee they'd go backwards and change that conversation. So I would say find the right spot academically at first and foremost. No question. Find what that makes sense to you. I think sometimes academically people are unrealistic. If you're a 2830 student and you tell me you want to go to engineering, the engineering route, that's going to be pretty tough. And I'm not saying you couldn't, but why are you a 2830 student? And then all of a sudden you want to go to one of the toughest majors right away. It sounds great, but again, find what makes sense to you.
So a lot of times when coaches are changing, parents think it's for better opportunities or things of that nature. What was it about Florida Southern that excited you as a coach, that really made it appealing, and now you're excited about building, that program now as a head coach at Florida Southern? What types of athletes do you feel would be a good fit at Florida Southern?
Well, we've got 9 national championships. We're top in Division II for the most national championships in the country. Obviously, if you know Division II baseball, Florida Southern's in the conversation immediately, and that's something that I've known throughout my career. To say that I saw myself, being here 10 years ago, I would have said no chance I would have an opportunity to, but also I don't know how I would have even gotten there. And now I'm sitting in this seat, and what it does is now all of a sudden my phone call, when they answer it, I usually don't have to tell them where we're at, who we are, that type of stuff. There is some type of history. Somebody's been tied to it. We have 191 professional players that have come out of Florida Southern. That it's unbelievable. And we had 14 big leaguers. With that being said, outside of Florida State and Miami, we have the most drafts of anybody in college baseball in Florida. So, that's something that says a lot right there. And to be honest with you, I didn't even know that. And if you look at our facility, we've got a beautiful clubhouse. We play at Henley Field, which is a historical facility that the Tigers had played in for years. It's just a really good setup in Lakeland, Florida. So when you get opportunities like this, I was, being at St. Leo was a wonderful place. I enjoyed it tremendously. The people were great. But when I had an opportunity like this, I just couldn't pass it up.
So I would love for you to discuss, so parents have some perspective, more importantly, athletes have some perspective. From a pitching perspective, there's not a lot of separation, at least at the NCAA level, maybe depth a little bit, but as far as the quality and the caliber of athletes that are playing not only in the Sunshine State, but Division II as a whole, can you talk about, when you're looking at recruits, something that would stand out, as far as skill set wise, over and above statistics, meaning whether the guy goes 0 for 4 or 3 for 4. You talked about quality at bats or the ability to make a quality pitch and a plus count. Give athletes some perspective on things that they really need to be aware of at that jump from high school into the NCAA Division II level.
Well, I think pitchability, let's just start pitching. I think that becomes a conversation immediately is pitchability is first and foremost, right? Like I was just at a major league facility here this past week, learning from a group, not too far from us. And I was with them and I asked them, hey, what are the most important things you look at? And obviously they have metrics coming out of everywhere. They have more technology than we ever would think of. We have great stuff here, TrackMan and all that type of stuff. But I said, what do you look for out of all these numbers they have? I mean, there's spreadsheet after spreadsheet. And the first thing they talked about as pitchers were first pitch strikes. They talked about strike percentage and batting average again in damage counts. Okay, so swing and miss basically. Okay. Those are the first three things they talked about with all the technology that's out there. Those are the first three things they talk about within their organization. Well, that told me right away, like, well, that's why we need it to be important to us as well. If you're down in counts, if you can't get ahead of hitters, if your first two or out of your first three pitches, the first two aren't strikes or two of those three aren't strikes, you're probably going to have tough outings. Things like that. That's one thing. So when we go recruiting, watch those guys who get ahead early, are not afraid to pitch off of a fastball. Guys train. Again, we'll go back to it. And I have no problem with the facilities. We have guys that go, there's no stopping it, right? We have guys that go to them all the time. But with the training of velocities, spin rates, and so on, you need to have pitchability, how to get outs. Because if you're the guy that throws 95 that can't get anybody out, you're just the guy that throws 95. I want a guy that can do all of it. I want him to be able, and I can help him, but I want a guy that can hold runners, a guy that can spin a breaking ball, can get a double play ball when it matters. The guy that when he gives up a base hit isn't on the mound pouting, but he's backing up a base because if the ball gets away, we stop the run from scoring. There's so much more than just, hey, I'm throwing this hard. I think that's the biggest thing for high school guys is, yes, I would be lying to say velocity does not matter in a lot of situations. Okay, that would be a lie. With that being said, it's not the only thing that matters. There's so much more. Pitchability matters. Again, if you can find the right, my son's a sidearm pitcher. Okay, we brought him down because it was a different look. He wasn't throwing as hard as some of the guys he wanted to throw as hard of. We dropped him down. He can get outs there. He changed that. That's somebody that lives in my house or did live in my house before he went to school, right? Like we changed it because that mid 80s guy was just going to be the mid 80s guy. So now it's a different look for him and he's being utilized and it's worked for him. So you just have to find out what's best for you and find a way to be great at it. Don't try to be your best friend. And of course, these kids now there's so much pressure from the outside. If it's from social media to families to other families to friends, whatever, it's impossible. If we walked around and went to work every day with everybody else's pressure on us, it'd make things hard. And this is what some of these kids are doing. They're trying to compare themselves to their friend or their teammate or, whatever. Just worry about getting better every day. Trying to be a great teammate, do all those things. Again, that's easier said than done. You have to have skill set. There's no question. But I think if you can start there, there's a really good base.
Would love for you to discuss, on that topic of analytics and metrics. In today's world, would Greg Maddox be a guy that would, catch anybody's eye? Meaning, are we not, as coaches, are we not really sharing the insights on how to read hitters, how to read, from a pitch sequence perspective? We've become so programmed from a computer perspective that we're taking away the actual in-game information that's being given to us pitch by pitch. And can you talk a little bit about how that can benefit if student athletes at younger ages begin to really be present and in-game and reading swings and reading pitch sequences and be able to take that information and turn that into results, for the team inning by inning? Can you talk about that as a coach and how you teach that to your athletes?
The first thing is we tell our guys these are just resources.
Right.
Okay. And that's the thing. These are resources to get you better. It's not who you are. So if you see somebody, we get heat maps, right? We can see where the weakness is at. The problem is if this guy's a two-seamer type of arm and everything's going to run into a righty, but the guy's weakness is away. Okay. If I tell him he's got to throw away because that's his weakness, well, now all of a sudden we just went the opposite of what we tell our guys to do is pitch to their strengths, swing to their strengths, do those type of things. Know who you are first. Okay, that is first and foremost. So we have our guys. I make them do a ranking sheet every other week, and they rank every one of their pitchers versus right-handed hitters, every one of their pitches versus left-handed hitters. So they know now when I call a pitch, it comes in. We do the watches. It comes in on the watch. They see fastball arm side. Okay, I'm going to call it off of what it looks like on that spreadsheet that they filled out, by the way. So all of a sudden, we beat that guy with a fastball. He's a right-handed hitter. He puts it over the first base dugout. I go back with the fastball. He shakes to a changeup, and I'm going, why? It doesn't make any sense. And by the way, not only does that make any sense, you sped up a bat that we beat already. You also, this is the fourth pitch on your ranking sheet. So I try to use the information to back my opinion. Now, it doesn't mean I'm always right. It doesn't mean that there's only a one size fit all. My guys can shake anytime they want to shake. It just has to be within reason. Why are they doing it? There has to be a plan. Understand who you are. Know what you need to do. And I think the other thing is like positive metrics. You've got the guy who throws that banger breaking ball and he buckles the kid. They remember that, right? They remember he looked terrible. It was on social media, all this other stuff, right? They look terrible, like he broke his ankles, whatever. Okay. The problem is if I look back at that and he threw it 10 times, he only threw that one for a strike. He just remembers that one. What about the other 9? That's the thing. You have to be comfortable in what you do. You have to have confidence in what you do. And it can't just be, I'm going to get on YouTube and find something different today. And the other thing is, sometimes you're going to stink. And so when your day goes bad, don't think you got to change the world. Just adjust, learn, and move on. That's it. And that's the hardest part is getting these guys. That's one thing being new here is everybody wants to be successful. But the problem we have is this game is so hard to chase results. You can't do it. So you've got to find a way to get the pitch to pitch, if that's offensively, defensively. And by the way, when it happened, learn from it and move on. Because if all you're doing is chasing numbers, it's going to be really difficult.
So that's the question that I wanted to ask, and we brought it to this point, and I think the last question I want you to kind of share with parents and athletes. Yes, the game is very hard, but for younger athletes, they have a very difficult time being present and moving forward from yesterday. And as a college coach, the game at the college level, because the games are 4 and sometimes 5 in a week with rain and so forth, you must be able to move forward. You can't think about yesterday, or you have to learn from yesterday and take that forward. Can you just talk about how to teach young athletes how to flush, learn, and move forward, and why that's a critical component to being a successful college student athlete?
Well, I think you have to be the same person every day. And if you're holding on to negative from the day before, it's hard to be the same guy that you showed up to the night before it all went bad on you. I think that's first and foremost. I think the other thing is this: you can't go back and change it no matter what you do. You have to understand it. You have to move on. It's a really difficult game. There's no question. But again, you have to be the same person. The only way you can do that is keep working at it and understand that, you could go 0 for 4 one night with 3 strikeouts and you open up with double double. You think you're the best player. So you went from being I stink to, man, I feel great. It happens that fast. That's the greatest thing, the best and worst thing about our game. You're going to play again quickly. If you're a football player, you play once a week. If you're a baseball player, you're going to have to play, and sometimes that's good and sometimes that's bad, but you have to be prepared to get to the next day. And that's why baseball is such a difficult sport, is because if you get into a funk, you can stay in that funk. And my thing is, if you get away from chasing the numbers and just understand the process and what you're trying to do, from at bat to bat to pitch, and that's easier said than done. Don't get me wrong. I'm not saying it's not. But I also think what happens is guys that can't do that, and I really think this is a big piece, guys that fail are more embarrassed than anything else. They're embarrassed because they let the team down, they let their family down. They're going to get on social media. If you're one of those markets that's, like ours, you're going to see who did well, who did not. You're going to have to walk in school the next day. If you're a high school kid, you're going to have to do all this. You're worried about stuff you can't control. And if they're really, people that you care about and care about you, it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter what your day was the day before. You can't be embarrassed of the result. And I think that's where a lot of kids have trouble. And it's really easy when you have a tough day, is to be mad, because not that you shouldn't be, because you're not competitive if you're not upset about it at some point. But there's a fine line of, hey, I'm moving on. You have to. Otherwise, you'll never get any better at it. My wife is a kindergarten teacher, and I remember my son, and I might have said this to you, Walter, last time we talked. My son was like 10 years old. He was playing the infield. I think he kicked a couple balls, did not have a good day. And he's all mad. He's getting in the car. He's mad as can be. And as simple as she could, she said, well, Ricky, I'm just going to tell you, today was your day to stink. Sometimes it happens. And I thought it was the most simple, realistic thing. Like, some days you're just going to have a tough day. You can't accept it. You got to find, especially if it's early in a game, you got to find a way to help your team out in any ways. But some days you're just not going to have a great day. And then you got to move on and learn from it.
Well, I want to say thank you. And parents, you're looking at schools, especially in this landscape currently with regard to college baseball. First of all, Rick Odette is a seasoned veteran coach, but he is a life mentor. These are the types of mentors that you want your student athletes to be around for 4 or 5 years, because it's bigger than the game of baseball itself. It's a broader canvas, and these 4 to 5 years are transitional years. They're not transactional years. And I think if we as parents, and if we share with our student athletes the role that college plays, and baseball is simply a part of that, I think you'll find that programs such as Florida Southern, under the leadership and guidance of Rick Odette, are going to add value and enhance your student athlete's future way over and above between the lines on the diamond. So, Rick, thank you so much for taking the time to join us today. I really appreciate you taking the time to share some Division II wisdom.
Well, thanks for having me. And Walter, as always, man, keep doing what you're doing. You're making this game better.
Well, I appreciate that. And folks, I want to let you know I'm going to be going down to a Florida Southern game this year. We're going to be doing with the Baseball Blue Book, a Where's Walter? And I'm going to be showing up at various games, all different levels throughout the spring into the early summer. And I want to encourage you, go to a college baseball game. If you live in an area where you have access to go to practices or games, very much like Rick had said earlier in the conversation, take advantage of that and go watch these athletes. It is probably the best bang for your buck, and it will really allow your student athlete at the younger ages to be able to interact and have access to be able to touch and talk to these college players. They welcome it, as does the coaching staff. Find the Florida Southern schedule on the Baseball Blue Book app, as well as whenever the camps are going on at Florida Southern, you'll be able to have that information as well. Download the Blue Book app, create your free profile, and go watch the Mocs play in season. Thank you, Rick, very, very much.
Thanks for having me.